In this video, I'd like to go over the combat encounters in Return of the Levidia. Remember, one of the design pillars is to remove any loading screen unless absolutely necessary. There's a lot that happens when an encounter starts, so let's go through the decisions I've made to shape the combat systems and the technical implementations. Hi, I'm BGK of Pear Tree Games, and this is Return of the Levidia Devlog 4, Combat Encounters. One of the first decisions I made regarding encounters was that I wanted the combat area to be enclosed. Having an endlessly open area to fight enemies sounds pretty cool, but the implementations become very difficult and open up a slew of issues you'd have to design around. Plus, an enclosed area is more in line with the games I'm inspired by, like Into the Breach by Subset Games. So the immediate questions I started to ask myself after this decision was how to enclose the area. If there's a hand-drawn area for each encounter, or procedurally created. If created by hand, how should you handle the player entering from various sides of the encounter? If procedural, how do you make sure it's the right size and not too big or too small for all the units to move about? So if we look at this upcoming encounter, if we look here and the player is coming from this direction, if we're going to do hand-drawn, we'd probably want the encounter to be something like this. Whereas if the player was coming from this side, we'd probably want the encounter to look more like this. So having hand-drawn ones was kind of dismissed pretty quickly. Since I was iterating the number of enemies and their movement stats, constantly adjusting the area became pretty cumbersome pretty fast. So that meant I needed to figure out a way to make the procedural area work for all situations. So let's walk through that. First, all of the encounters are loaded into a culling group. When the player is close enough to enemies, the encounter will check the distance and line of sight to the player, and if those checks succeed, the encounter will begin. We also, for performance reasons, use that culling group to disable the enemies from moving around if they're not visible or within the area as well. We can see this with some enemies over here by the beach are moving around right now because they're just barely visible, while the culling group is barely visible up in this corner. But if we rotate the camera so that we can't see them and we're not close, then we can see they've all stopped and they'll just wait until we're back into that area again. Now, when an encounter actually starts and the check is succeeded, let's see what happens. Okay, so the first thing that happens is the player units quickly get into their own tile grouped behind the player facing the enemy who started the encounter. So we can see that the players all got onto a separate one facing the same direction. The enemies then also go to their own spot in case that there's a bit of overlap, because when they're not on an encounter, we can actually have them be on the same tile for a bit of time, so they would break off to make sure that everyone gets their own spot. Second, once all the units have a known starting position and are moving towards them, we calculate a path between each unit's position. This guarantees no unit will be cordoned off and stuck somewhere outside of the combat area. Then, from each point along each path, we expand outwards by some number. I found 3 tiles to be a good spread, essentially meaning each path becomes 7 tiles wide. Now we need to make sure that there are no tiles that could cause a unit to get stuck. To do that, we do a breadth-first search from every tile and to see if we hit any other tile which is occupied by a unit or was in any of our original paths between the units. You can see that if we had the points down here, if for some reason any unit went down there, they would be unable to make it back because there is no stairs to get back up. So we check all of these one by one just to make sure that there actually is a valid path back. If not, we'll just get rid of them. Finally, now that we have all the tiles for the combat area, we disable all neighboring tiles not included in that area to close it off and add a visual effect to the world. And there we are. All of this happens in a split second with multi-threading and time slicing to avoid hiccups in performance and guarantees a proper area for combat. The only other thing I'll mention for encounters is that they are placed by hand and the types and number of enemies is set, so there's no procedural element in what encounters a player will experience. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.